The Bad Batch ruined Palpatine's plan. Or did they? Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. Bad Batch Season 3 did something that we didn't quite expect it to do, which was just nuke everything and solve the problems of all of the dangling threads that they had.
Yep.
By just destroying everything.
Yeah.
Which isn't the first time that they've done this, where a lot of the Bad Batch is just explaining the one line of like, somehow Palpatine returned.
Yep.
And also in Mandalorian, they have this underlying need as they go deeper into this time period for them to answer the question or add details and context to somehow Palpatine returned. And they did something similar, which is they just nuked the whole cloning of Moff Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about, like, what is Palpatine's plan? Because we know that he achieves some semblance of cloning in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
By the time that he shows up in between, like, basically probably Empire Strikes Back up to Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
At some point during that time period and before, he achieved cloning in some form or fashion in a way that allowed him to continue to survive, albeit not in the greatest condition. So I want to talk about, like, what is happening here.
Yeah.
Because Bad Batch left a lot of threads, even though they solved some of them by just nuking everything. They left a lot of threads.
They did. We kind of thought that they were really going to delve deep into Palpatine with Bad Batch.
Was it first or second episode of season 3?
There he is with Project Necromancer. Like it just seemed like this was the direction they were going in. It was the start of their cloning attempts and stuff like that, which yes it was, but it was still so foggy by the end of season 3 that I was like, it could have been anything. And now Hemlock's gone, so, and the last of the Kaminoans too, so what can you really do about it? Kind of thing. Yeah, just really interesting how they did just kind of clean up their own Bad Batch threads, but then left everything else still kind of like,
Yeah. It's almost worse that they solved the Bad Batch threads in that final episode than they would have just leaving a lot of those answered or those questions still unanswered. Because now there's like the whole idea of like, okay, well, how does Palpatine get to the cloning aspect then?
Right.
If like these continued experiments keep failing, where does it get fixed? Like, where's the moment that Palpatine works on this? And it's not even that, oh yeah, Hemlock didn't work out, he's dead now. Well, we'll adjust and try in another way. It's like, no, this is shut down, and now we're working on the Death Star.
Right.
It does make me wonder, like, does Palpatine have something somewhere else in the galaxy working on the same thing? Using different resources to try to replicate it? Is it closer to home instead of on Mount Tantus? Is it actually on Coruscant?
Ooh, that would be a really cool story. Who knows? It is really interesting that they touch again on this in Mandalorian with Moff Gideon, and he seems to be quite successful.
Yes.
Like, he's got full-fledged
clones of himself
in the vats, like in process. And yeah, it's like, oh, too bad that all got nuked kind of thing. Like,
and it seems like he's pretty far along on this idea of replicating the Force. Or at least is further along than they got in the Bad Batch. Yeah.
And more complete in a way than even what Palpatine gets to.
Yes.
Which, I mean, Palpatine's kind of a weird one because it's kind of like,
and we don't know which one's the clone.
Right, yeah.
By the time that we get to Rise of Skywalker, we don't know if it was the clone
or if that was the
killed
original,
in the original trilogy that fell down the pit. Was that the clone? Because he had lightning powers, or is this new version a clone?
Right.
Or are, like, both of them clones? Is only one a clone? Is one not the clone? Like, and there's tons of those questions still there.
And what makes a clone versus the original? Like, how do you explain all of that?
Snoke was a clone, so we realize that. Like, there's all of these different pieces with the phrase, somehow Palpatine returned. And it seemed like, for the majority of Season 3 in particular, and I would say even Season 2, they were exploring this idea of making that one line make sense.
Yeah.
Like that felt like the purpose of it. Like obviously the purpose individually is the Bad Batch and their growing relationship. Omega was the main character, which they ended up not necessarily going in that direction that much.
No, not really.
They didn't explain any of that side of things. And we ultimately see that she just stays on that single planet for the whole time period until she's like probably 30, I think is how old she would be.
Really?
Because in season 1 of Bad Batch, she's like 13, 14.
Yeah.
And by the time the rebellion happens, being actually a part of it,
right,
you're at the Battle of Yavin time period. So,
oof, yeah.
But I think it's actually in the 30s.
Oof, wow. That's kind of a sad. Maybe it's not sad. I mean, beautiful.
It's kind of depressing that she just stays
sad.
on that planet for the whole time period and doesn't do anything with the abilities that she's learned or any of the skills that she's developed.
I'm glad they got to have a beautiful little life for a good long time. But also, that's just not... Is that really a clone's life? Like, is that really her life? Come on. So, man.
Yeah, so the time period, she'd be around like 28 to 32 years old around that time point. Because Rebellion didn't start until around 2 years before the Battle of Yavin.
Huh.
And Bad Batch takes place around like 18 BBY, and she's like 13 to 14 during season 3. Wow. So she's on that planet for quite some time.
Oh my gosh.
So, and ultimately, like, they don't explore her character. They really sideline her character until she's able to like get into the Rebellion side of things. And we don't know if it's before the Battle of Yavin rebellion, or is it the second Death Star rebellion? Like,
right, that's true.
What level of the rebellion are they at? There's a lot of questions there. But going back to Palpatine, I think there needs to be this deeper exploration into what Palpatine's doing, what his plans are, because we know what he set up with cloning.
Right.
All the way back with Order 66, all the way back to the Kaminoans. Ends up getting picked back up again by the time the Mandalorian time period happens.
Yep.
Because we see that in Mandalorian Season 3.
Yeah.
There's a gap in between there, and then there's another gap after Mandalorian Season 3. So in theory, as they get closer to the Force Awakens in the timeline, in theory, they need to start answering those questions to make that more believable. Because as it stands right now, it's Force Awakens, Snoke, and then it's The Last Jedi, Snoke dies. The third one, oh hey, it's Palpatine.
Yeah, and there is this like disconnect, especially for someone like me who really hasn't gotten into like the books or anything like that. Like, I would never have known anything about Palpatine's interest from the beginning on cloning.
Yes.
Like that.
It's a super niche part of Legends too.
Yeah. So like, it's so out of the blue, it feels like, especially by the end, that it does feel like it needs some time. Like it needs to be really start getting baked in here about like, no, this was Palpatine's plan all along. Like,
it needs to be on screen in some form or fashion.
Yeah, we need a good Palpatine story here.
Yes, to make it make sense. And like, oh, but they don't need to do that, blah, blah, blah. It's like the whole reason for the Clone Wars is explaining this tiny little phrase that Obi Wan Kenobi said in A New Hope. We got a 7-season show and a mini-series around a single phrase in the original trilogy. So to say they don't need to do it because it's in the sequels, not necessarily true, because they did it in the original trilogy and the prequels. There needs to be this exploration there that adds the depth to this phrase and line to make it make sense, rather than just having it being this dangling thing that's explained in a crawl. And Fortnite. So there's a lot of those pieces, and I think there's potential for it. I would love to see it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and would love to hear your theories on how they could make this make sense. Like, what time period is it going to work? Let us know in the comments below. Check out our podcast, and may the Force be with you.